criteria is, you need to have a good credit history. You need to have the ability to repay the loan. So if you do a 12-month look back and your financials are such, your cash flow is such that you would not qualify for a loan then, you're not going to qualify for this, because they want to show that you do have the ability to repay, because this is a low interest loan from the SBA. And of course, the entire United States now has been declared a disaster area, so we are all part of the declared area. This particular program goes up to $2 million, and you can request to be considered for up to $10,000 immediately, and we'll talk more about that. As I mentioned, it's a low interest loan. It's 3.75% for small businesses and 2.75% for nonprofit orgs. It is a 30-year term. The loan is really meant to be for working capital. So, you need to meet SBA's definition of small business, be creditworthy, and show the ability to repay the loan. The loan may be used for really any expense associated with your business. They have really expanded this. It can be used for payroll expenses, accounts payable, even rent and mortgage for the business is included. With the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, the funds come directly from the U.S. Treasury. So like I mentioned, you're going to apply directly for this loan, and you may do that at sba.gov. There are no fees to apply. And also, if you apply and you are approved, you're not under obligation to take any of that loan. If at the time you're approved, you've decided that there's a better alternative, then you are not required to take it. And you do not have to draw down the entire amount if you only want a portion of what is offered. This loan, they will do up to $25,000 unsecured. Over $25,000, we expect that they will ask for collateral, although SBA is saying that would not be a sole reason for turn down. On this particular loan, there will be no payments due for 12 months. And applicants that have an existing SBA disaster loan can still qualify for this particular loan, but then you cannot consolidate those two loans under this particular program. The other thing that I wanted to say is this, like I said, is a working capital loan. So they're going to take a look back for the previous 12 months, begin with February 1st of 2019, go through January 31st of 2020, and your average monthly fixed expenses times 6 is an approximate way to figure what you may qualify for under this program. So I'm going to run you through here on exactly how to apply for this particular program. If you go to sba.gov,
Hey, Vanda?
Yes, sir?
Hey, we have some questions before we go into the application. Can we pause and ask some of those?
Sure, I started to do that.
Okay, so we have a question from Toya Martin, and she asked, what is the actual time frame for the payroll that can be used?
The expense amount will be figured from February 1st of 2019 to January 31st of 2020, and that will be an average monthly cost for payroll and payroll expenses. And the period to use this, we will get into that here in a little bit, but it will go back to February the 15th. If you're approved for the loan, then you can pick up payroll from February 15th and bring any people that you may have laid off back on.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
I think so. Toya, if it doesn't, please just put in chat, and we'll make sure that we get you answered. So we also have a question from Tony Horton, and Tony asked, if you have already laid off employees, are you going to still be eligible for the payroll loan?
Yes.
Payroll loan or EIDL?
Well, okay, so
So he's asking specifically about the PPP. He's asking about the payroll.
You know what? Let's save that question until we get through this section, okay?
Okay. So we had a question, and so some of these questions may be a little bit early, and we'll answer them during the course of the presentation if they are. But I'm going to go ahead and get them out now so that we can make room for other questions. Does the EIDL help the self-employed? And that's from Whitney Beeson.
It can possibly help the self-employed. It is based off of 6 months of operating expenses.
Okay. Kevin Goldstein, did you have something to add? Is there someone? Okay. Kevin Goldstein asked, on the PPP loan, employers must bring their employers by June 30th of 2020. Bring back their employees by June 30th of 2020, correct? And do they have to keep them after June 30th of 2020?
You know, a lot of this is yet to be determined, but it looks like you've got from February 15th through June 30th to come back to that average payroll expense that you had on that 12-month look back. And I think that SBA will end up asking, you know, and this is really on the PPP program, but I think that business owners are going to need to keep excellent records and be able to prove that you did keep a consistent payroll. We don't know for what period of time. I'm going to guess at least 6 months.
Okay. If you're ready to continue, we'll save the rest of the questions for a little bit later in the presentation.
Okay, so we're going to pick back up here. If you happen to be where you can go to sba.gov, this is a screen that you will see. And I want to remind you again that this is not part of the CARES. This is not the PPP program. This is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So this is what they're also referring to as a working capital loan. So this is the first thing that you'll see at sba.gov. And right up here where this blue arrow is, it says click here. So you click there, and then this is your next screen. And it's just saying that it's a streamlined process. If any of you who are with us applied for this EIDL loan prior to this past Monday, you need to apply again in order to be considered for the up to $10,000 grant. And we'll get to a little bit more of that here in just a moment. So the first thing you have to do is choose one of these. Probably the majority of you will either check the first box or the second box. And you have to choose one, and at the bottom of the page, it will then allow you to go to the next page. The questions here, you need to go through and answer each of these, but if you cannot check each of these boxes, you will not be allowed to continue with the application. So now, as you notice across the top, now we're going into the business information. And this is, you know, just simple information, your legal business name. So if you're an LLC or if you're incorporated, that is what goes here. Your trade name, your DBA, goes in the next cell. And if you will notice these red lines over here to the left, those have to be filled out before you can go to the next page. And as you fill in the data, the cell will turn green. Next, for the application, you need to either include your EIN, TIN, SSN, and now it's going to come to your organization type. Over at the right of that cell, there's a drop down, and these are some of the choices that, well, actually, these are all the choices. So, you know, most of us are going to put LLC, sole prop, or C Corp or S Corp, general partnership. So that takes care of that, and you advance. So here's some things before you actually sit down to fill out the application that if you will gather, it's going to, you know, make it a lot quicker for you. Obviously, answer the first two questions at the top by clicking on the button. Next, put in your gross revenues. And again, it's a 12-month look back. This is really every program that we've dealt with so far. It's a 12-month look back beginning February 1st of 2019. So put your revenues, put your cost of goods sold. If you have rental properties, put your lost rents due to the disaster. This next line and the next and the three there towards the end, those are for nonprofit organizations that you know, need to fill in that. For-profit businesses, just leave those blank. It does not have a red cell over to the left, so you can move forward without answering those. If you have received compensation from another organization, another entity, here is where you're going to provide that information, how much, and give a brief explanation of what that is. So we have one community who the EDC is helping small businesses. So, you know, they would put up there, you know, maybe they received $1,000. There's an EDC grant is what would go in there. So now you're going to give your business location. This must be a physical address, city, state, zip, all the way down your business phone call, your business phone number. And then the next page, again, just the business information, the date the business was established, you know, even before you, how long has your business been around? And then the next one is, how long have you owned it? The business activity question, again, over to the right, there'll be a drop down. And here you'll see some of the things that you can select. And then after you select the correct category here, the next cell, detailed business activity, there's another drop down that is determined by the business activity that you chose. So use the drop down for these two. And then the very last one on that page is the number of employees you had as of January 31st of 2020. We move on, and so up here at the top, you'll see now we're at the business owner information. And the very first question is your business owned by a business entity? So in most instances, it's going to be no. And now you're going to start filling out the personal information. So you've already given the business information. Now you're moving on to the owner or agent's information. You'll need to provide this personal information for anyone involved in the, not involved in the business, but any owner of the business if they own 20% or more of the company. First name, last name, you know, contact information right here, the percent of ownership, personal email, social, date of birth, and place of birth. And if, and put then their personal residence over here. If there is more than one owner or member, in the case of an LLC, you're going to come over here and click, you know, add additional owner. And you just continue doing that for as many owners or members that you have. If you have a parent company, if you checked back there that your business is owned by a business entity, then this is the information that will pop up instead of that personal information that we just went over. So we're already to the additional information of the application. So you just need to click your answer for each one of these questions. And then leave this area empty, because really they're just trying to capture if you have paid someone to do this for you. And there is absolutely no reason to pay anyone to do this application. And then right here is the part of the EIDL loan application, which is what we're going over, that is a result of the CARES Act. So we suggest that everyone go ahead and click here that you would like to be considered for an advance of up to $10,000. We have not, SBA has not shared with us anything about how they're determining who receives this, if everyone receives it, or what their formula is for determining how much you will receive. So, you know, we're just saying click the box, and then certainly you have to give your bank name, account number, and routing number, because this, should you receive this, they're calling it advance, but this is a portion that is the Economic Injury Disaster Grant, again, that was written into that CARES Act that was signed into law last Friday. SBA is saying that this will be in your account within a matter of days. So certainly keep an eye on that. You click next. You have to, you know, click here that you certify that everything you have said above is true and correct. Again, hit the next button. And at this point, a summary of everything that you've just answered will pop up. And towards the upper right hand of that screen, there's an edit button. So if you have a typo or you see some incorrect information, hit the edit button and go in, and it will let you correct it from right there. Do not hit your back button, the browser back button, because you will lose everything. Inside the program, there is a back button that really here, it lets you go in and make those changes when you get to the summary. But if you hit your browser back button, you will have to start over on the process. Okay, any questions over the EIDL loan or the EIDL grant?
So Vonda, we have a lot of questions. We'll start with the chat, if that's okay. All right, so the first question is from Shannon. She actually has her hand up. On the EID loans, what is used as a benchmark for ability to repay the loan? Who would this be? Past tax returns, collateral, or something else?
It's going to be cash flow. Looking at, and anytime you apply for a loan, you're going to have to provide probably 3 years of tax returns and current financial statements. So they're going to take a look at that global cash flow of the business and see what is available and if you have that ability. And that is an area that the SBDC can help with as well.
Okay, the next question is from Daniel Ahern. Are the loans being reviewed locally by the SBDC first, and how long are replies typically taking?
No, Daniel, when you submit this online, it goes directly to the SBA Disaster Loan Department, which is a different side than what businesses usually deal with. But it goes to the Disaster Loan Department. And quite honestly, we don't know how long it's going to take. We had some clients apply last week. They do receive an email. So let me just say, when you hit that submit button, you're going to have a case number pop up. Make sure you write that case number down because that is going to be the identifier for you anytime you're contacted by SBA. So within 3 to 4 days, it seems like our clients are receiving a response saying, you know, you did not qualify, or if you want to be considered for that up to $10,000 EIDL grant, you need to reapply, things like that. So there's some communication. What we think will happen is, you know, hopefully within 5 to 7 days, you'll receive communication from SBA. You'll be assigned a caseworker, and then they will begin asking for additional backup material from you. Probably they're going to ask for the tax returns, may ask for cash flow statements, a personal financial statement, your typical documents when you apply for any loan. So we really encourage you to go ahead and prepare and have those things ready.
Okay. So under business, the next question is from Jean Hall. She says, under business type, is there no option for a 501c3?
We're going with, on the first drop down,
It's a nonprofit.
it's
Yes, a nonprofit.
other services, and then just other, as I believe, because we did not find where there is a drop down for nonprofits.
Okay.
But they do qualify for this program.
Is there one for accountants? Is it the same thing?
You know, if the business has been adversely affected, I think that they qualify. And we can look back right quick to see what businesses popped up. Okay, agriculture. Okay, I don't see accounting up there, but you may be under just services.
Yeah.
So whenever I filled
Services.
mine out, Banda, it was business services and then financial. And there's also a finance there that they can go under
Right.
as well.
Right, here's finance, business services, miscellaneous services. So that is what I would go ahead and check, because even if they come back and say that, you know, you don't qualify for whatever reason, you were at least in the queue and had a chance. The EIDL program, there was $50 billion allotted for this program, and that will obviously run out given the entire United States may now apply. So we just really encourage you to go ahead and apply. If it's not perfect, we're told your caseworker will contact you and ask for additional information.
Okay, the next question is, what happens if you had a typo in the application in the email address and did not notice until you submitted the application?
I would resubmit.
All right, for EIDL, if we are a dual member LLC operating as a 1065 and do not have a payroll nor 1099s for the two owners, but do have 1099 contractors that work for us, would we qualify for the EIDL?
Yes. In this instance, if you have regular contract labor, then they are counting that as payroll expense. They're also counting, including the owners in payroll expenses.
Okay.
The formula, I should say.
Okay. On the EID loans, what is used as a benchmark for ability to repay the loan? Would this be past tax returns? Oh, we already answered this one. Okay. What do we do if we don't have a long history because of starting?
Why don't y'all look that up? There is a date specifically that says if you were in business by this date, and it was a January or February date. And so when y'all, okay, we're looking that date up. I don't remember exactly, but you do not have been in business very long at all to qualify and to show that you have been affected by this disaster.
Okay. Laura is asking, she said, I filled out this short form version of the EIDL this week and requested the 10,000. Do I also need to go back and finish the longer version to be able to get the larger loan, or will someone contact me eventually based on the short form version to get additional information needed to qualify, financials, etc.?
This week, as of Monday morning, this past Monday morning, that streamlined process is all that you have to do until contacted by the SBA, by the person that's working with your application.
Okay. Do I qualify if I become an independent contractor in October till 3/1/20, but haven't had any work so far this year?
Wow. Okay, this particular loan is for working capital. So I think that a lot of that would depend upon the expenses. And I think there would be a lot of questions there. You know, I would go back to how strong of an application is it? Is the credit score there? Do you have history? Is there an explanation why there hasn't been any revenue coming in at this point? But if you have had expenses and if you feel you've been adversely impacted, then maybe that's one of those that maybe they should give us a call and let's talk about it, because it sounds like that's perhaps questionable. Sure.
I would just say for the 15 minutes that it's involved in doing the application, I would just go ahead and do the application and get it on the system. And once the loan number is assigned, then you can go from there.
That is true.
Okay. Kip Harmon says, if you are a sole proprietor operating without a DBA, do you just put your name and trade name?
Yes, that would be fine. Well, you can just put your DBA name in both of those.
And so for questions on the EIDL application, we were guided by the SBA to not overthink the application. So like, for example, if you're a nonprofit and it asks duration of current ownership, you could put how long your executive director's been in place, how long your board director's been in there. And again, what they stressed was they're trying to get that $10,000 cash grant advance in the hands of businesses as quickly as possible, and then asking questions and verification later. So if there's something on that loan application that you're just not sure exactly how to answer it, and that's not something that, and we're not able to answer it either, the guidance was to not overthink it.
Okay. The next question is kind of in the same category. It says a question when we get to the PPP program, in the case of a church where ownership doesn't apply, what would we put in this part of the application?
Okay, we've had a big debate the last couple of days about that. And I sent that question to both the Dallas and Lubbock SBA district offices. And their response is that the form, that particular form was one that was created really quickly, and the language on it was just leaning towards business owners. But when you click that you're a nonprofit, now there's a difference in a nonprofit and in a faith-based organization, but check whatever block applies to you. You need to be a 501c, D, or E, I believe. And so you're going to probably also click like your other services. And when you get to the business owners page, we suggest putting the key board of directors. Yesterday, we ran into some board of directors that were not okay to do that because it says business owner. Well, prior to that, you're saying they have 0% ownership, and that's just the language that they used. But if you meet opposition on that, just go ahead, get one person's name on it and turn it in. And if they want the full board, SBA, once that caseworker gets a hold of it, they can call and request it, or you can fill it out for your key board members.
Ronna Prickett, I think that may have just answered your question, but I'll go ahead and read it off anyway. It says nonprofits have board members, but not owners. Do we leave that blank? I think you just said, just put one person down, and then, if they want more, then send that, right?
Right.
Okay. All right. So Kelly says, in a sole proprietorship, small independent oil company with one contract labor worker, how many employees would be reported?
Okay. So keep in mind that this loan any owner is going to have to show that their business was adversely affected by the COVID-19. So that's going to be one of the big variables there. If you usually pay yourself or withdraw, that is going to count, but it's looking at expenses. This particular loan is based off of expenses. It's for working capital. And quite honestly, the oil industry is something that we're still waiting on clarification. If that particular business can show that, you know, they have been impacted because their employees were having to stay home because of the COVID virus, or one of them was sick, or whatever that reason is, and it is directly tied to the COVID-19, then that may apply, but it cannot be solely related to an economic downturn.
When asked a few pages ago on the EIDL app, have you received any other loans? If we do EIDL after PPP, would we list PPP there?
Yes, but I would do EIDL first because it's open right now, and the payroll protection plan is supposed to roll out tomorrow, but I think it's going to be next week before we see it really going strong.
Okay. Megan says, we plan to apply for PPP, but is it true that you were able to apply for both EIDL and PPP, but can't accept both? What about in terms of the $10,000 EIDL grant?
Let's hit that in just a minute because we need to move to.
Okay, so on that particular one, the 10,000 up to, keep in mind it's up to 10,000. That is a grant. You may keep that. There's no need to repay. And what was the rest of that?
About rolling to PPP.
Oh, okay. So we will cover the rolling those together. If you have an EIDL loan, you can roll it into the PPP. You may apply to both programs. You may accept both, but you cannot use them for the same reason. So, you know, all they're saying is you may not apply and receive funds from both programs for the same expenses. So one's really for working capital, the EIDL loan, and the PPP, it's really intended to cover payroll for 2 months.
Okay. Mark says, for the EIDL, does cost of goods sold exclude administrative and overhead costs?
I do not believe so.
Okay.
Because if those are just normal operating expenses for the business, I do not think so. If anyone else that's on here has a better answer, please feel free. But I think that you will include all expenses. Look at your fixed expenses, what we normally call fixed expenses.
Yeah. Whitney says the EIDL grant is not required to pay back for anyone.
And that is incorrect. So I'm sorry, you said EIDL grant, right?
Yes.
Okay, that is true. You do not have to repay the EIDL grant, but the EIDL loan will be set up on a repayment with the first payment beginning in 6 to 12 months.
Okay. Jeff says, I've already applied online for this grant, but I don't remember checking the box to receive $10,000. How do I check to see if I did, or how do I review my application?
Apply again. That is what the SBA is telling us, just apply again.
Okay. This one says, I guess I missed how you qualify or apply for the difference between the loan and the grant.
The only thing that is different is that you have to click that box right. I'm going to flip back to it right quick. Right here on the screen. So the grant is what you have been, no, that loan is what you have been filling out up to this point. And now you're going to check this box right here if you want to be considered for up to $10,000 advance. So this right here is the only difference.
Okay. Floyd Cable asks, if I have never gotten a loan for operating my business in the past, but since I will need money to restart and promote my business, would I still be able to apply for the EIDL? More or less, seed money, or he needs money to start to promote his business as a realtor.
It's not for new businesses.
It is not for new business, and it's not for business expansion. It will be based off of that 12-month look back for expenses, or if you're a new business that has just started with less than a year, the expenses to date.
Can we take some more questions offline? Because it's 2:40.
Okay.
Yeah, we can answer the rest later. I was just going through on the ones that were having to do with what we were doing.
Yeah, let's go ahead and pause the questions for now and continue, because I know we have a long way to go and we're already halfway through our time.
Okay, so what we have talked about to this point has been the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, with the one piece of the CARES Act, the Emergency Economic Injury Grant. So those are the two things that we've really addressed to this point. The next thing that we're going to cover is what we're hearing a lot about this week that came into play since last Friday, when the CARES Act was signed into law. The Paycheck Protection Program, you'll hear it called the PPP. This is, as it indicates, geared more towards payroll and payroll expenses. This is a loan where you will work with your local lender. You need to contact your lender, see if they're going to be a processor for this program. It is 100% guaranteed to the lenders. And this is the one that will be a portion of it or potentially all of it forgiven if you use it as intended. It too is going to be based on that 12-month look back, the average of payroll and payroll expenses multiplied by 2.5. They're giving you the 0.5 room to wiggle with some other expenses. The max loan size on this is 10 million. You know, we keep getting questions about, well, what are payroll expenses? It's just anything tied to payroll that you may have with your company, leave pay group, health, retirement, any type of the payroll taxes and net self-income, and any regular contract labor that you deal with. There's some conflicting information about the interest rate should yours be turned to a loan at a later date, but we know that the interest rate will be 4% or less. No collateral is required from the borrower, and we know that loan payments are deferred for anywhere between 6 to 12 months on this program as well. There are no fees associated with this loan application, and the balance will be 2 years on any portion of this loan that is not forgiven. The Paycheck Protection Program, it is based on up to 8 weeks of payroll, and that is what they're going to base the forgiveness off of. They're going to make this program retroactive to February the 15th. So if you have laid some employees off, you can make this retroactive and go back and pay them. And I believe Kevin commented that you have until June 30th to get things back within your normal average, or whatever you reported was your average monthly payroll. It does not necessarily have to be the same people. They're looking at, have you kept those positions, both full-time and part-time count. It's a full-time equivalent when they ask you for the number of workers. And these loans are available through June 30th as well. Okay, I'm going to quickly show you this. This is the U.S. Treasury website. So the Treasury and SBA are working together with this program. So here's your home page, and you're going to click right here. When you click there, it is going to take you to, I'm not going to get the one I wanted. Bear with me just a moment.
Those are the ones I've got pulled up.
Okay, so, all right, I'm not for sure. Let me, so there, when you go to that website, I will just go there. Okay, and we're going to click right here. And it's going to give you some basic information, but right here is the best information that I have found, and really the only information that's out there right now. But you click here for an overview of the program. If you are a lender, you may have more information than we do, but this is all we have. If you're a borrower, you get more information here, but right here is the application. And all I wanted to point out was that it is very streamlined as well. Just your, check any of the boxes up here, legal name, business address, and remember they want physical addresses. Here's your DBA or trade name, your EIN, contact information. And right here is the formula. Given that 12-month look back, it's your average monthly payroll times 2.5. And right here is the number that you'll put there. And right here is that number of jobs as of January 31st. And then what is the purpose of this loan? So you may check one or all of them. That is up to you. But if you end up using this loan, if more than 25% of it is used for something other than payroll, we're told that will not be forgiven. As long as you keep any non-payroll expenses under 25%, then that too may be forgiven. And here's where you just put the owners. This is, their title, the ownership. Here's again your identifying number and personal address. Answer these questions right here. And it says, that you have read these and understand them and that you're basically telling the truth. And anyone who is of 20% or greater owner must initial here. And you sign it, print your name, date it, and this is what your local lender will be using for the application. Please keep in mind that at this point, we do not know what else the lenders will be requiring. I'm not for sure if they even know at this point. So that is why, even though SBA has published the date of April 3rd for rolling this out, I think there's still a lot to be determined on exactly how to execute this. So even though the application is simple to keep from bogging down the SBA intake person, keep in mind you are going to have to produce your normal loan documents at some point. So, go ahead while you're doing this, get together 3 years tax returns, fill out a personal financial statement, if you do not have a 2019 tax return, just make sure you have your income statement. And they're probably going to ask for a balance sheet as well. It's normal things that you have to have when you apply for a loan. It's just that the application has been really streamlined to where they can, go through and think, okay, yes, they qualify or potentially qualify, or absolutely no, they don't qualify in a more timely manner. Okay, let's see here. How do I get back to?
You're on the PowerPoint.
I am, okay. So we had some, how about some questions here?
Can I run through some stuff related to PPP and EIDL?
Yes,
Okay.
certainly.
Switch.
You want to switch?
Yep.
Stick. Yeah, right.
So I'm more than just a floating head behind Vanda's shoulder in the last 40 minutes. Let's see. I want to do a real top level overview of PPP because that's where I'm not even looking at the questions box because I know it has exploded. Like Vanda mentioned, this is being rolled out really quickly. Lenders are still trying to figure out, they've been in meetings, they've been working on stuff, talking with the SBA to figure out how they're going to execute on this. Be patient with everyone. As far as government work is concerned, this is extremely fast for them. When you're looking for more information about PPP and some of the other programs, specifically on EIDL and PPP, the two sources that you need to always go back to when you read news articles, you're talking to people and say, oh, well, you know, I heard about some free money. Go to the SBA website and find information there. Go to the Treasury website and find information there. I've got the screen shared right now. This is on the SBA website. There's a quick overview. We're not going to go over the same information. We're going to kind of do like a quick FAQ thing to answer some of these questions that are in the chat box, I'm sure. How do we apply? Okay, well, you need to talk with your local lender. Not all lenders are going to be participating in this program. The most important thing you can do right now is pick up the phone, get their email, and contact them and say, hey, I'm interested in this. Are you guys going to play ball? It's up to them to figure out how they're going to execute that and then work with them. So it's, you know, these are hard times, so we need to work together and lean on each other. So it's more important now than ever that you've got a good relationship with your lender. Another common question is, okay, well, I know that this loan for PPP is up to 100% forgivable. Well, how is it forgiven and how do I calculate that amount? Well, it's based off of 8 weeks. It's based off of your average monthly payroll times 2.5, and that's the formula we've all seen. You need to spend over 3/4 of that amount using payroll for retaining workers for up to 8 weeks. And that was a question that we had earlier, was how long do I need to keep people on for? Well, at least 8 weeks in order for you to have that amount forgiven. If your numbers drop below that, you know, it's not that it disqualifies you for forgiveness. It just lowers the amount that can be forgiven and then turns into a loan. What's the terms on it? Again, we've seen some information coming from different places. Could be 0.5%, could be up to 4%. But you'll be starting to pay that back in 6 to 12 months. Again, once you talk with your local lender about how that's going to work. So here's just that quick overview on the SBA website. This is from the Treasury Department, and I will post all of these links into chat so you guys can follow along later. If you have more questions that are more detailed than what we don't get to today in the chat, look at these documents. Most of your questions will probably answered there. When can I apply? So we're told that it's going to start tomorrow. I think that's a little ambitious, but that's for small businesses and sole props. If you're an independent contractor or just a small-time self-employed individual, you're not eligible to start applying for PPP until April the 10th. So you've got a little bit more time to get your information together. And we'll talk about which documents you should pull together soon. Where do I apply? That's through your regular lender. You need to be having that conversation. When we get a hard list of which local lenders are going to be participating in this, we will let you know. Everybody in chat, I think we should be getting people's email addresses, and we'll add you to our secret squirrel list. And so that's where we're sending out only the essential important information for disaster assistance. Who can apply? Okay, it normally would be for somebody who's qualified as a small business, but they broadened it to anybody who's under 500 employees with a few stipulations here or there. How do I apply? We've talked about that. Documents, we'll cover that in just a minute. Do I need to first look for other funds before applying for a PPP? And that used to be something that would catch a lot of folks, is that you had to go to a traditional lender. You had to have what's called credit elsewhere. And so they're waiving that requirement. And there's some other requirements that they're waiving that are pretty important. I mean, these are unprecedented times for them to say, there's no personal guarantee necessary. There's no collateral necessary for this. That is wild. And we are just as shocked as you are. But we're going forth with the information that we have now. How long do you have to apply? Well, it's open until June 30th. However, there is a funding cap, right? There's only a limited amount of funds available for this program. Now, could there be more in the future? Possibly, but that's why you need to be up on it and act quickly. And as to how it works with EIDL, the economic injury disaster loans, that's a separate pool of money, but it suffers from the same fate. Eventually, that money is going to run out, so you need to go ahead and apply. How many loans can I take out? Well, it's only one for each business. What can I spend the money on? Payroll costs. Okay, well, what do you mean payroll costs? Well, it's salary and wages, commissions, tips if you're in the restaurant business, maybe some bonuses. When you're calculating that loan amount, 2.5 times your average monthly, that's capped at $100,000 for each employee. So if you have some large earners on there, you will not be forgiven when you pay them more than $100,000. So looking forward and for what the next 8 weeks, 10 weeks looks like, maybe people take some pay cuts so that you maximize the amount of forgiveness that you're getting. Let's see. So you would apply for each individual business. You notice what counts as payroll costs and what it can be used for. You notice that jet skis are not on here. Vacation homes are not on here. That expenses outside of what these approved costs are, you're going to have to pay back. And again, if it's way outside, like I said, a jet ski, now you're talking about an investigation from the government, and that's going to get you in trouble. So when we were looking at like clawbacks or penalties, really this document does cover that later, but it's important because I've only seen it in a couple of places where they're talking about if you do things the wrong way. Just like with EIDL on the front end, some of this is self-certified. Okay, when you fill out your EIDL application before, you notice that there wasn't a place for you to upload documentation. There wasn't a place for you to ask how much money you could borrow. When you're contacted by your case manager later, that's where they're going to ask for that information. So if you're not good at keeping track of your finances now, and you're living on shoebox receipts, now's the time for you to clean up your act and start getting organized, because you don't want to, at the end of this, find out that because of sloppy bookkeeping that you have to pay a lot of this back. Even if it's at a minimal interest rate, just now's the time to be paying attention to that stuff. And so you'll notice here that it covers, one of the payroll costs is medical and sick leave. It also covers insurance costs. There's a cap on the loan. You guys can all look on that, how much can be forgiven. And again, this is another important part I want to stress, because we are already several weeks into this and many people have already been laid off. If you rehire those people back to those previous levels, that can count towards your loan forgiveness amount. So that's really important, because the spirit of this loan, just like with the EIDL loan, is to get funds into the hands of small businesses as quickly as we can, so people don't have to go to unemployment, so that we can float them the best way that we can. And they're in a hurry to get this done. So it's kind of a money first, ask questions later. I don't like to use that simplification, but that's kind of how it is. Let's see, 2 years, all that good stuff. Here's a doc to look at. That's not it. There we are. You drag that over here. Pow. This is a good comparison between the two while we're talking about PPP. What's it used for? Payroll and those approved expenses that we talked about. No jet skis. That other working capital, that may be something that you need to look at under an EIDL loan. No collateral, again, up to 100% approval. How do we calculate that? All things that we've talked about before. The order of operations can be important for how you apply for this stuff. Should I do one? Should I do the other? Should I do both? Our broad suggestion, without knowing the details of everybody's business, is that you should consider applying for the economic injury disaster loan, what Vanda was talking about before. It's simple. If you've got your documentation later for when they call and ask for papers, for finances, you can produce, but it can be rolled into a PPP. We've gotten that guidance from the SBA. So if mostly what you need is working capital, try to take advantage of that up to $10,000 in grant money, and then roll that into a lower interest rate PPP. That's really kind of what we're seeing as the best case scenario. And again, we'll make this available to everybody later on. A couple more documents that I'll share in the chat, and we can email these out. This is from the U.S. Senate Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship. No one should know this better than they do, because they were some main authors on getting it done. So it's another FAQ. Okay, if I want more information on Paycheck Protection Program, PPP, click here. If I want to know about the Small Business Debt Relief Program, that's another tool, but unless you already have an existing SBA loan, you can just pass right over that. If you do, you can look onto that offline. And then here's more on EIDL loans and some tax provisions. But let's jump to PPP real quick. Who's eligible? Again, this is a little bit easier on the eyes. And if you're like me and you've been digesting stuff for small businesses constantly for the last week, anything that's easy on the eyes is well appreciated. Let's see. How do we determine our loan size? What costs? Okay, so we get some more specifics. Okay, well, what is it? All right, well, that's good. Need to know that. Let's see. So we're going to cover this next, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. So this is really to prevent double dipping on something that we'll hit in just a second. How can I use this? Rent, utilities, again, keeping the lights on. So really that's pretty much it for PPP. We know all the what, when, where, why. Steve,
Walter?
Yep.
Hey, we've got a couple of questions about PPP, and I know that you're kind of storming through some of this. Can we ask some questions before you go on to the next act?
Yes.
Okay, so we've got about 11 questions. I'm going to go through these 11, and then we will we'll continue on with the presentation. We're a little bit over our hour. We thank you guys for sticking with us. So Terry Doyle asks, would your spouse need to be added as an additional person under your DBA or just his name? And I don't know which program he's talking about there, but that is the question.
Well, I mean, so a DBA is generally under a sole proprietorship. Texas is a community property state. And so that's not really.
I would go with whatever's on the DBA.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
probably about who should apply. Yes, whoever's on the DBA.
Okay, next up we have Miranda Harvey, and Miranda asks, an agricultural enterprise, i.e. a farm, does not qualify for the EIDL $10,000 advance. Is that correct?
I believe I've read that somewhere, and that's because I believe USDA has some other specialty programs for farms specifically. So I would, for an ag business, also be consulting the Texas Department of Agriculture and USDA's website. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to ask and answer this one just because I know the answer. Melissa Huff asked, we have multiple owners in our limited liability partnership. No one has over 20% ownership. Who would we list as owners? And Melissa, what I'll tell you on that is I've gone through both of the forms, the EIDL form and the PPP form, and you have to list all of your owners, every one of them, for your LLP or LLC. Okay, next up we have Whitney Beeson, and Whitney asks, my question can be answered by other means. I appreciate that, but we'll go ahead and ask it now. I'm a realtor, and I'm wondering if I should apply for the grant or just for the unemployment benefits allowed for self-employed individuals. What is your recommendation?
Not without knowing a whole lot about the business. I mean, that's a hard call to make without knowing anything about the numbers.
Okay, let's push Whitney. We'd probably recommend that you go to your CPA or financial expert and talk to them a little bit.
And that's something that the SBDC could help with. I mean, we just got to get some more info.
So
Gotcha.
next week, we're trying to have a person from Texas Workforce Commission out of Austin hold a Q&A for us. And that is another thing. Like I was on the TWC site today trying to get more information about unemployment. We are told it would be 75% of the usual monthly income plus an additional $600. But that is where you're going to have to weigh out several options, because in this instance there are options.
Okay. Next up, we have Shauna LaRoque, and I happen to know Shauna owns Crashworks. Big fan of Crashworks. And Shauna asks, does anyone who applies for the Paycheck Protection Program automatically receive it?
No. It is back to those qualifiers of, your credit,
This is more like a traditional loan.
and does it cash flow? And they're going to look at, does it make sense? Because in case it would convert to a loan.
Okay, I believe we have 4 more questions, so I'm gonna go through these next 4, and then we'll continue on with the presentation. Tony Horton asked, do the employees that have filed for unemployment discontinue their applications if we're going to do, and I assume he's talking about the Paycheck Protection Program, if you're going to apply for that?
If perhaps he means if they have already applied for unemployment, would they now qualify for the same expense in the PPP program?
Yeah, I think that may be what he's asking about.
As the employees of the owner.
I have been told that yes, that in that instance, you can go back and pick them up even if they have filed for unemployment. But again, you'll notice at the bottom of our slides, there's a disclaimer. Information, this is probably the slowest day for a change of information that we've had in 2 weeks. So they're pushing this stuff out, and sometimes they push it out before they've worked all the kinks out. So
If they've
certainly get that verified.
If they've got a place in line for unemployment, keep it.
Yeah.
And wait for PPP stuff to settle out.
Okay, excellent. So Dustin Nims asked, and he's with Nims Law, he asked, would a pass-through LLC with one employee shared between 2 owners of other businesses be eligible? So basically there's an employee, it's that employee's work is shared between 2 owners, and they work for a pass-through LLC. The LLC has no income other than the money put in biweekly to cover payroll.
And I would think only the portion of payroll that one LLC has would be what they would look at for PPP.
Okay.
Again, separate if each individual business that had that employee shared is also going to need to apply if they're looking to maximize, but I'm not certain.
Okay.
Well,
Kevin,
I would check with your CPA on that one.
okay. Good deal. Kevin Goldstein asked, can we repeat the forgivable and non-forgivable amounts under the payroll and use of the funds?
The amounts, yes.
Can you repeat it disappeared on me. Morgan was a little bit too quick. Let me see if I can find it again. Yeah, I lost it. I don't see it in the answered section, but yeah, if you guys know the answer.
Yeah, I think if I remember the question right, is what are the approved expenses that are forgivable? Wages, salary, tips, benefits, vacation. Again, not stuff that's covered under Families First, but other types. Let's see, dismissal or separation. Okay, so that would be severance.
So you cannot apply to both programs for the same expenses. I wonder if we'll check with Kevin later, but you can't use your idle loan for payroll and then turn around and apply to the PPP program for payroll as well.
And given that it's 2020 and a lot of people that I've even talked to are looking at now as a good time to retire, payment of retirement benefits is an eligible expense for PPP. Let's see what's not. And then he asked questions, I think, about the amount. again, the total forgivable loan amount, is 2.5 times your average monthly. But on certain salaries over $100,000, it's capped at $100,000 about how much is forgiven of that loan. Did that cover it?
This question was from Dustin Nims, right?
This question was, the previous question was from Dustin. This one was from Kevin Goldstein.
Okay.
So we can, Kevin, we can loop around with you on that one. Let's go ahead and ask our last two questions that we have here for this part of the Q&A.
Steve, sorry, I think that answered it. I found this question. It says, can you repeat the forgivable and non-forgivable amounts under the payroll, use, and funds? So I think we answered it.
Okay, thank you. So in turn, we have an anonymous attendee. They ask, if we apply for a PPP grant, and I want to clarify that the PPP is not a grant. It is a loan with a forgivable amount. So if you apply for the PPP loan and some amount is forgiven, will the forgiven amount be considered income for IRS purposes when we file our 2020 taxes?
It will not be.
Okay, good deal. That was one of my questions as well. I'm very happy about that.
So for Kevin's question, again, the amount, when you're calculating how much is forgiven, it's those payroll costs for 8 weeks, excluding over the $100,000. And then payroll costs, and again, these other things that are mentioned as covered before. And in order to receive that amount, 75% of your entire loan amount needs to be spent towards those costs. Does that make sense? And that's also in one of the documents that we'll link. So the vast majority, it has to be spent on payroll or payroll expenses.
Excellent. So the final question for this section is from Greg Ross. And Greg Ross asked, I've read the forgivable loan feature of the program as the economic equivalent of a grant that is supported by the Act's provision that the loan forgiveness described above will not be treated as taxable debt cancellation under the IRS code. Is that true? And
Hey, Greg, email me with that and I will send that out.
Okay, good deal. Okay, we'll turn it back over to you, Walter and Vanda. Thank you.
Okay, Walter, if you'll pull the PowerPoint back up, I think the rest of it is your stuff.
This one?
Right, so, the debt relief, yeah.
Yeah, so small business debt relief, that really only applies to you if you have an SBA loan, which probably not a lot of people on the call have. And then this, but there are a couple more things that I wanted to show. Again, so you've really got 4 tools in the toolbox. Some of them are ready and some of them are not. First one's EIDL. Second one's PPP, which, soon to hit. The third one is, hold on, let me get the name right. I'm always forgetting the name. It's called Families First Coronavirus Response Act. This went into effect where if you are a small business, you are required by law to provide your workers up to 80 hours of paid sick time. Now, I'm like, okay, well, is it sick time? Is it paid time off? What is eligible under that stuff? What's going to affect most of the businesses probably on the call right now has to do with the shelter in place. They're quarantined, they're in isolation, they are at home caring for somebody who is ill or caring for children because schools are closed. And so people need to look into this because it does affect all small businesses. You can be exempted from it. There's some paperwork that you need to do. But what's important about it is that, yes, you have to provide 2 weeks of this sick leave, but it is 100% reimbursed by the government. So yeah, there's a cash flow issues. You need to pay people to be on vacation. And the mechanics on how that'll work is through payroll taxes, not paying the payroll taxes to the government, and then in some cases be advanced on future payroll taxes. And you can learn more about that on one of the links that I'll post into chat. But if you want details on it, do a Google search for Families First Coronavirus Response Act. And so some people may think, well, all right, well, if I'm going to get essentially, I mean, and this is oversimplification, 2 weeks free paid vacation for my employees paid for by the government, how can I do that and also maximize my PPP? In the language for the CARES Act, it excludes you using the payroll tax advances for. So again, they've been pretty clear on avoiding double dipping. But it's another tool for you to be able to keep employees working and paid to keep them out of unemployment. And you can find things for them to do, or if you've got them home on leave. If they are caring for children because school is closed and they can't find other childcare, that expands up to, I believe, 10 weeks at 2/3 pay. Again, there's more details on that, but this is something that's going to affect everybody. And because this is a labor issue, guess what? That generates a new labor law poster. Woo-hoo! We all love our labor law posters. So this is something that you need to have posted in your place of business. We'll get on our soapbox very quickly. You don't need to pay anyone to send you labor law posters. You can go to the IRS website, go to the Department of Labor, and you can fill out lots of forms there to tell you what you need to print off, but you don't need to be paying $100. What do they charge, $120 a year?
DOL.gov gives you every poster you need.
So having this poster is something that you need to have up right now. Starts April 1st, so that people know that they are allowed that 2 weeks of paid sick leave that's reimbursed by Uncle Sam. An important note is that if you rehire laid off workers, they are still eligible for this. You have to honor this, and that's way in the weeds of the CARES Act. And the final thing, the fourth thing that I mentioned before that is a tool for many of you businesses out there is called the Employee Retention Credit. And so if maybe PPP is not for you, maybe you don't qualify, maybe you just decided not to need it. Maybe your business is affected, but it's not crippled. You may be eligible for the Employee Retention Credit. So the qualifications on that is that business has been partially suspended for COVID-19, and that your gross receipts fall below half of what they were in a similar quarter in 2019. And so if that's true, you can't go back, you can't make too much money, but if you have lost a little bit of business, I would say more than a little bit, but then you can qualify for a credit of 50% of those wages up to $10,000. So again, $10,000 is not a ton of money when you're looking at massive payroll, but again, this is separate of those other programs. So you can have this and those others as far as I'm aware. The Families First was really the first bullet I think that was fired as far as small business relief. Mm-hmm. But they didn't work out the mechanics of how it was going to work through payroll taxes last week, and then they really kind of got some more guidance on that. But there's even a form. So like, let's say in these 2 weeks of sick wages that I pay out, if I pay out more than what I would be paying in payroll taxes, you can let the IRS know, and they will advance you the difference. Again, because it is 100% covered by the government.
Okay, so Walter, we have, I think, the last 10 questions, and then we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Do you have anything else you want to cover before we go into Q&A again?
Nope.
That is it. We would love for everyone to like us and Think IT on Facebook. We're America's SBDC at MSU, and of course, Think of IT. And we're keeping updates there. And then if you'd like to be on our email list, we go into a bit more detail when we have the updates.
And
okay.
I'm going to post a link to how do I get to that? Left panel? Is there like an all or something?
Okay, you want to go ahead with some questions, Steve?
Yeah.
Yes. So Merrill Kane asked, 2 of our 4 employees are graduating from MSU in May. Will we be penalized for not keeping them on staff, even though they're planning to leave in May?
Well, We have no idea that, the intricacies of how this is going to work. To me, that seems like a perfectly reasonable explanation. But sometimes the government isn't exactly reasonable nor logical. So I would say that we need to, Meryl, email, let me send that up, see if we can get an answer in writing.
Okay, next up, the next question is from Dennis Go. And Dennis asks, would property taxes be covered under the programs?
I need to look back at that because I do remember reading something about taxes. But I don't have that at the top of my head without doing some more reading.
Excellent. Okay, our next question is from Craig Lewis. And Craig Lewis asks, with regard to contract labor, I have not seen the authority for including payroll. I have not seen the authority for including in payroll cost these items. Can you point me to the language in the bill that authorizes that in the bill that authorizes that as a defined payroll cost? Sorry, it's a little bit hard to get through that one.
Yeah, I think I understand what he's asking. We'll just have to, I can't just rattle off what part of that right now. So we did print the 800 pages off last weekend. And Walter's actually searching on it right now.
Oh man, so because I have been playing around with this a little bit. I think it's on page, man, this is in the way. Hold on.
Most of our stuff was in the pages 60s and 70s.
Yeah, for what counts for payroll costs in the CARES Act, I believe that's on page 10 and 11, where it talks about salary, wages, tips, cash equivalents, let's see, separation, retirement. Yeah, that's on page 10 and 11 of the CARES Act.
Excellent. Okay, good deal.
Okay.
Next up.
So part of that was we have been on training for every day just about with SBA or some department, and that was included in those, even the White House briefing that we had with contract labor. If it's a part of your regular, what you would consider a payroll expense. And so we'll have to find the exact language, but they have mentioned that multiple times in these trainings.
Okay, next up we have from Rona Kelton. And Rona asks, how do you determine if the business is presently impaired by COVID-19 if they are only going by historical information from 2019?
So they're using the historical data to determine the amount of the loan that you qualify for, because basically your fixed expenses should not be changing that much, but it's going to be, you're impacted by either revenues, by not having employees, maybe your supply delivery that was interrupted. There are many ways that your business may have been affected by the COVID-19.
Okay, excellent. We've got some questions from Kevin Goldstein again. He asked, have you heard if each bank that is participating in the PPP is allocated a certain dollar amount for its customer base or for the public?
We have not heard anything.
Okay. His next question is, we have heard that it could be as much as $100 million per institution. Okay, it was a statement, not a question. Okay. Okay, we have a question here from an anonymous attendee that says, is the whole 100,000 kicked out or just the amount over 100,000? I think they put in an extra zero. They meant the 10,000. If I would guess what that question
Are you
means.
talking about the payroll on the people that are making more than $100,000?
It may be that. Is the whole 100,000 kicked out or just the amount over 100,000?
It's the amount over.
It's the amount over 100,000. Okay.
Yeah, and so that's, you might decide to, again, have people take a pay cut to help make sure, again, that you're maximizing, well, you're still getting paid. It's not what you used to be, but it's not costing the business any more money in the terms of like what you'd have to finance or
But,
cash flow.
okay, and certainly work with your tax preparer or your accountant that keeps your books, because there's also a part where you cannot have lowered your employees' wages more than 24, 25%. So, there's several things you've got to keep in mind.
Okay. We've got another one from an anonymous. It says, since there is an application deadline for the PPP, should essential employers apply and be approved now in case there is a need in the near future?
You have to prove a need, and the other thing is, they look at what can you convert. How liquid are you? And so if you have the ability to meet your debt obligations, you're not going to receive this loan. But I think you can project out and go ahead and apply. Have that discussion with your lender.
Okay.
One of the questions that we missed earlier was who is eligible, like how fresh are those businesses? February 15th, businesses and entities must have been in operations since February 15th
Of 2020.
of this year. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, because there were a couple of questions about that. One that stuck into my mind was a gentleman asked if his business that had started on February 20th, was that an eligible business for these programs? So
Been in operation
Yes.
since 15th. Well, no, that would be after the 15th.
Yep. So Bonnie McCabe asked, do employee health insurance premiums qualify as payroll expenses?
Yes. Yes, anything associated with payroll. Yes.
Group health care benefits, including insurance premiums, yes.
Okay. Ms. Toya Martin asked, since the time frame for the payroll costs, February 2019 to January 2020, as I understand, does not sync with normal quarterly payroll reports, what documents will be needed to provide or to document payroll costs? And I can answer this because I had to do it yesterday. Toya, you'll need your W-3, which you report in your yearly. And what will happen is that they will take your W-3 total and they'll divide that by 12 to get your monthly average. And then that is what they will use to base your PPP on. At least as of yesterday, that was the case. Is that what y'all understand, Vanda, Walter?
That's, I think any way that you go about proving that 12-month look back, whether it be taxes, W-3s, financial statements from your CPA,
Okay.
and your payroll taxes, because they want to make sure that you are current on taxes as well.
Miss Whitney Beeson says, thank you. You can add me. Whitney will capture your email address, but I won't read it publicly for everyone. You can thank me later. We have an anonymous attendee who asked, has anyone found out the specific start date for businesses to qualify? Yes, that was February 15th of 2020. And then Mr. Floyd Cable asked, our church was without a pastor in 2019, but we paid a fill-in pastor or fill-in pastors during that period. We just hired our pastor just prior to the COVID-19 event. We are paying the new pastor at a higher salary than we were paying the fill-in pastors working week to week. How will we figure the pastor's salary for the Paycheck Protection Program?
I think in this particular instance, you're just going to have to provide evidence of the new salary rate and, provide that and explain the situation.
Yeah, all the wording on the calculations are passed on previous expenses. So when you're working with your lender to make the application, that's supporting documentation that you might want to you might want to have.
Okay, good deal. And then the last question in Q&A, we have one in chat that I will read, and I'll get to it in a second. The last question in our Q&A section is, since my business was established February 12th of 2020, what is needed for approval?
I realize there's not a lot there, but it's going to be your revenues and your expenses.
Yeah, your lender is going to ask for pretty much everything that you're going to have since the 12th.
Okay, and then the very last question for today, before we thank everyone for attending, was from Mr. Thomas Barber, and he asked, will the Texas Workforce Commission rate go up for employees filing for the month of business closing before reopening business due to restrictions?
We are told they will not, but stay tuned. I'm not 100% confident in that, but that is the answer I received earlier this week.
Okay, good deal. So that wraps up our Q&A and our presentation. And I want to extend a thank you. We have about 138 people still on the call, and I really want to extend a thank you for sitting through this with us and learning about these forgivable federal loan programs, the EIDL and the CARES Act PPP. If you have any questions about this, I really encourage you to go to the SBA.gov to reach out to the SBDC directly. And I want to make a note about the SBDC. So recently, I guess it was about 2 years ago, Vanda, you can correct me if I'm wrong, they got their funding cut. So if you found presentations like this useful, you need to call your state congressman and tell them to refund the SBDC. Because things like this are critical.
That'd be a great Christmas gift or any time of year gift.
So I'll throw that out there. Please call your congressman. Let them know how important presentations like this are for your business. And as for Think of IT, we're really happy to be able to give back to the community in this way. And if you need anything technology related, please reach out to us. And until then, that's all we've got. Thank you so much for attending this. And Vanda, Walter, I'll turn it over to you for a closing.
Okay, we just have two quick things.
So as you guys have more questions, we have a COVID-19 Small Business Assistance Hotline. That's 940-252-4471. You can just reach out to us on a regular number, but that's the one that we've got staffed extra hours out of the day to take calls. I think we've got Mason's contact information.
And remember, if you'd be willing to visit with Mason from KAUZ TV6, please give him a call at 940-500-5083. I'm sure he has a deadline and he'd like to get over to you right after this.
And the last thing that I'm going to drop into chat is a link to kind of register for the workshop that we did. That is how we kind of validate that we're working with small businesses and what types of businesses that we're working with. That's going to be the last thing that's in there. It's going to ask you questions about how many employees you have, about your sales. It's going to ask you about contact information, and that's all confidential. It's directly with us for the SBDC. At the very end, there is a non-disclosure agreement, so that keeps our mouth shut about it.
But it won't take you 60 seconds to fill it out, so we would really appreciate it if you would do that for us. All right, thanks all of you. Steve, thank you so much for including the SBDC and for putting this amazing group together. We really appreciate it. And I know Think of IT and the SBDC are here to help in any way that we can.
Thank you, guys. Y'all have a wonderful day. Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Stay well, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.